Joining me now is former Republican Congressman, retired Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel, what do you think about the president's refocusing now on the economy and the infrastructure, and is this what needs to be the focus in 2018?
Well, it's good to be with you, John, and happy Easter. And I will tell you that absolutely, I mean, I am very impressed that the president would bring this up, but I think that this is the wrong time to start bringing up additional spending as far as infrastructure spending, when just last week he signed this massive $1.3 trillion spending bill. And when you go and you dig through that 2,200 some odd pages, you see a lot more of wasteful spending come out of Washington, D.C. Top of the list comes out $568.7 million that goes to Planned Parenthood, a not-for-profit organization that's running a profit. So if we're going to get serious and we're going to prioritize the things that the federal government needs to be doing, such as the infrastructure spending, they should have taken that into consideration last week before we had this massive spending bill.
Colonel, happy Easter to you as well. It's great to have you on the show. Look, I agree with you about this spending bill. It is, to me, it's outrageous. There's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats right now. Debt doubled under President Bush. It doubled under President Obama. It's continuing. The problem we have, though, is aging infrastructure. It's not like President Eisenhower, who built the interstate system. We're not opening up commerce, but we're having to repair what is already out there that is aging and falling apart. Where do we get the money to pay for this?
Well, sadly, we're going to have to continue to borrow the money to be able to make this happen. And that's one of the problems that you have up there in the swamp in Washington, D.C., is a lack of priority. And I think that that is one thing that the president should probably have done a little bit better. If you want to prioritize the top two things for his administration, it should have been defense spending and it should have been the infrastructure spending. And I would recommend, if I was there advising the president, he should have separated non-defense discretionary from defense discretionary spending and had two different appropriations measures and said those were the priorities for those two respective measures and had the Congress pass them as such. But now, once again, we have this massive spending. We'll have to borrow more money from, I don't know, China, whomever. Maybe the Federal Reserve will print more money in order for us to get our roads and infrastructure repaired, which is what the stimulus plan of President Barack Obama was supposed to have done, and that was almost $1 trillion of spending.
Yeah, and the problem is the 1991 and 1993, Congress raided the gas tax, which has made it insolvent, which is supposed to be going to repair these roads and bridges, and it's not. It's going into the general funds of states, up to 40% of that going to different state functions and not going into roads. What do you do about this infrastructure? Does this work, taking $200 billion and leveraging that up to $1.5 trillion?
I think that you're going to have to prioritize those projects. But again, we're talking about, you know, the Band-Aid and trying to put it over a sucking chest wound. And the most important thing to realize is that the Highway Trust Fund, it has been robbed, and that is what the gas tax is supposed to go to. So it comes back to the incredibly horrible spending practices of the Congress, the House and Senate. And you're right, John, no matter who is up there, they still have the same disease. So I think that's the thing that we have to fix first, and then prioritize these projects and make sure that we're getting them finished on time and we're not running over the budgets and not having to borrow more money to do it.
Colonel, it's the easiest to see financial crisis coming in history. The American debt bomb that's going to happen. It may happen 15 or 20 years from now, but these guys are literally leveraging our country's future so they get reelected. Nobody's willing to address with it, which is a shame because we need these things fixed. Moving to Russia, sir. It's announcing today that the U.S. will expel 60 U.S. diplomats and close the U.S. consulate in St. Petersburg in retaliation for U.S. measures. Talking about Russia, rather, sir. Taking in response to the poisoning of an ex-Russian spy and his daughter in Britain. Colonel, is this a sign that the Trump administration is getting ahead of this? They've talked so much, the media has, about collusion, about what is going on between President Trump and President Putin. But is this a sign they're actually getting ahead of it? And much more importantly, is this enough?
Well, it's funny, John, because back in 2012, who will ever forget the infamous line from Barack Obama when Mitt Romney said that Russia was our #1 geopolitical foe, and President Obama said the 80s was calling for their strategy back. We are here in a new Cold War era, and Vladimir Putin is just as bad an actor as, you know, going back to a Stalin or a Khrushchev or whoever. And I think that President Trump has now seen this reality, and we are taking the right actions. Look, President Obama sent socks and food to the Ukrainian military. President Trump has been sending weapons. We have our forces that are working with the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, to thwart the Russian aggression that is there. So I think that we are truly in a new Cold War era, and you're going to see more of these type of diplomatic actions.
Sir, I think we are in a new Cold War era, and I agree with you. But the problem you have with President Putin is he's still getting whatever he wants. He wanted the port of Tartus there in Syria. He got a 49-year lease. He wanted the deep water port in Crimea. He got that. Now, I understand these sanctions, the expulsion of certain diplomats, but at some point, sir, do we need not to go after President Putin himself directly?
Well, I think the most important thing is to put the pressure on the Russian oligarchs, and we need to start looking at how we put the sanctions against them. But the most important thing, John, is to have a credible military threat, and we don't have that credible military threat, and that has allowed Vladimir Putin to do what he's doing. The other thing is to use the natural gas, the liquid natural gas that we have an abundance of here in the United States of America, and ship it over so that many of these European countries don't have to depend on Russia, and that will put a real big kick in his economy. And that's how you have to undermine Vladimir Putin. The economy first, have a credible military threat that can stand against him, and then I think the Russian people will finally realize that this is not the person that's going to take us forward.
Colonel, just to push back a little bit, the natural gas, I certainly agree with you on, because the way to hurt President Putin is you take away his oil infrastructure, his energy infrastructure, and hurt him financially, but not having a credible threat. Sir, we spend 10 times what Russia does on our military. Do you think that our military, and I know you're not saying this, sir, is not credible as in a threat to Russia right now?
Well, when you have 50% of your combat aviation fleet that is non-mission capable, when you have an Army that is at levels prior to 9/11, a Navy that is at 1917 levels, and a Marine Corps is at World War I levels, we are seeing the money that is being appropriated to the Department of Defense going to the bureaucracy of the Department of Defense, going into the wasteful spending on these acquisition and procurement programs instead of making sure that we do have those men and women able to stand out there and create that deterrent. So I think that that's, well, when we see the increase of the defense budget, I hope it goes to the trigger pullers, the men and the women in uniform on the ground, and not to the Pentagon itself.